Good evening.
We'll call to order the regularly scheduled board meeting of the San Marcos CISD Board of Trustees for Monday, February 17th. We have all 7 trustees present. We can stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Gotcha.
She got me.
All right, we have public forum, but I don't see anyone signed up today. So we'll move right into the superintendent's report.
Mr. President, members of the board, welcome. With just a few things. Last week was a great week to be a Rattler, so just a little bit of a recap before we talk about the TAPER report, because there's academics and then there's creating a whole child. So we think last week demonstrated creating a whole child. So I want to start off congratulating our men's choir who performed in front of over 2,000 plus students. I mean, they gave an amazing performance. So much so that we're trying to send a letter a young man sent to the choir director to the Daily Record to explain like the experience, because I think he explained it pretty well. But it was a great performance. I think the biggest thing, my takeaway, is listening to choir directors sitting behind us as they finished saying, those look like our kids. Like so the level of expectation like was raised when they were like, if those kids can do it, then why not our kids? And so I think the performance was amazing. Also want to congratulate our wrestlers who are moving on to state. Gianna Moreno, who is the first district's Region 4 champion in the weight class of 128, and she was also the wrestler of the meet for the young women. Yeah. Christopher Solis, who is at 182, who is the Region 4 champion. We've never had Region 4 champions. We've had kids that have qualified, but not champions. Matt Banda, who came in second place and really was injured, so he defaulted his championship match to save himself for state. They didn't want to risk injury of his shoulder. Caitlin Haggerty, who came in second place in her weight class, and then Mason Moreno, who placed third, who had to come back from losing in the morning. Just to put it in perspective, we were 10-0 after the first round. We were the only school that had all 10 of their wrestlers win the first round, which is impressive in and of itself. So congratulations to our wrestlers. They will be in Cy-Fair, the Berry Center, Thursday night, wrestling all day Friday and Saturday. And so we're excited about some of their chances. We also want to congratulate Haley Jones, who is a student here at San Marcos High School, who is having her artwork shown at the Capitol in the lower rotunda. So we appreciate the work that the art teachers and Haley do to represent us. And then as a reminder to the principals, Dr. Cunningham sent y'all an email last Thursday about the census dates to get to him, so we can coordinate with the city to get people to volunteer. If you've already responded, thank you, but for those of you that still need to, we need to get a master calendar list of that. And then with that, I want to turn it over to Trustee Arredondo, who has a special recognition for a former board member at San Marcos.
Thank you, Mr. Cardona and Mr. Fernandez, Executive Director of Communications, for compiling this information today. And colleagues on the board and those gathered in the gallery, thank you for your time and attention. Tonight, I would like to take a brief moment to honor the life of former San Marcos CISD School Board Trustee and Public Servant, Reverend Alfonso Washington. Mr. Washington enjoyed a long and healthy life, but passed away recently after a brief illness on February 1st, 2020, at the age of 106 near his current residence in Warrenton, Virginia. He was described as a man that did not shy away from public service or challenges that arose in our San Marcos community. He gave through his role as a minister, but also became very involved in local politics. As a political novice, he entered a San Marcos City Council race, but was not successful. However, his journey would lead him to become one of our San Marcos CISD School Board trustees in 1978. Mr. Washington strongly believed that quality education presents the best opportunity for lifelong success, and he wanted to be a part of the team that worked towards securing such opportunity for all of our community's children. He was successfully reelected and ultimately served on our school board for 12 consecutive years until his retirement in 1990. He was always humble in his leadership and glad to serve, and he was honored in 1994 when San Marcos renamed our local A. Washington Child Development Center after him, which still serves young people today. And I think more than anything, Black History Month takes on a special significance when we remember the giants whose shoulders we stand on today, advocating for children. So thank you.
Mr. President, that's the superintendent's report.
That takes us to item 6A, academic update, which is the annual Texas Academic Performance Report. This is Ms. Ruiz Mills.
Mr. President, a question before she starts.
Sure.
Should we have her present the whole report? Should we have any questions and wait until after then, or do we ask them in between?
You can, I mean, as long as we wait for an opportune moment, I don't think we have to hold everything until the end, because it's usually presented in sections, so I'll just wait for a window, and if I see hands, I'll.
Good evening, Board of Trustees. I'm Monica Ruiz Mills, Deputy Superintendent, and this evening we're going to be reviewing the 2018-2019 Annual Accountability Report. The data that we will see this evening was presented to you back in August of 2019, but we'll also be reviewing data from years 2016, 2017, and 2018 as well. The report can be found on our district website. It takes you to the complete TAPER report, which has every data set for the last 3 years on there. There are 7 sections in the annual report. We have the TAPER report, the PEAMS Financial Standard Report, the 2018-2019 District Accreditation Status, the Campus Performance Objectives, the report on violent or criminal incidents on campuses, the student performance in post-secondary institutions, and the 2018-2019 TAPER glossary. There are 2 formats to this report. The one we'll be utilizing this evening is the PDF version, which will also be housed on every campus and at central office. And then there is also the comprehensive online data system. So the TAPER is organized into 6 parts. We have the cover page, the performance page, participation, attendance, graduation, and dropout rates, CCMR and post-secondary readiness, and profiles for students and teachers. So part 1, cover page. In August, we received our district accountability rating. That was a C. For 2019, our special education determination status was needs assistance. Last year, we were at a MET standard under the former PBMAS, the performance-based monitoring system. This year, it has changed to results-driven accountability. Our status to remain at the MET standard, the mean should have been at a 1.1 cut score. We were at a 1.4, which moved us into the needs assistance. That simply means that at the local level, we will continue to monitor our special ed population. We will look at the interventions and continue to provide support for our students and for our teachers. This year also, under that rating, they included discipline data from 2018, not 2019, but from 2018, just looking and counting numbers of how many times students in this program were either given ISS in school suspension, out of school suspension, or placed at the DAEP. 2019 ASVAB, we were at meets requirements, and we will show our distinction designations in a moment. Here are the accountability ratings that we went over back in August for all of our campuses. And here are the distinction designations that were provided in August as well during this accountability system at Crockett, Hernandez, and Miller. So part 2, performance. Performance in the taper measures all 3 parts, participation rates. It gives you 2 years of performance, and it's reported by each assessment for each grade level. It includes the accountability subsets of students that took the test in the summer of 2018, December of 2018, spring 2019, and then STAR 3 through 8. It also includes all the students that were here on October the 26th, which was our snapshot date back in 2018, where we had 8,066 students. We still have areas of concern, as we spoke back in August, about 4th grade overall in writing and also in English 1. And we continue to work with our students and provide support for our teachers, especially as we go through the effective school framework model and utilizing the curriculum and the assessments we have. But we do have some highlights as well. Page 3 of your taper report, which is page 38 of your board book, you'll see that we did show growth in math and reading for 3rd grade at all 3 levels of approaches, meets, and masters. In 5th grade, we showed growth in math, reading, and science, as well as in English 2, U.S. history, and biology. And then in 8th grade, we showed growth in science and social study. In the all subjects, all grades, we did show gains in the meets and masters, which is really where we're trying to get our students. So we're doing small, progressive, incremental steps and still continuing to fill the gaps. So this next slide is the progress of prior year non-proficient students. What this means is students who did not pass in the previous year's assessment, they passed in the following year. So if I am in 3rd grade in 2018 and I don't pass my reading test, but I pass it in 4th grade, then we get points for this as well. And that's on page 9 of your taper, 44 of the board book. So this is our English language learners performance by model. Again, some slight gains here as well. In all grades and all subjects for our English language learners, we showed increases in academic growth at the meets and the master's level. And then taper part 3 is participation. Again, this is the percentage of students that were administered the test, the percentage of the students that were included in the accountability system, the percentage of students that did not test, or the percentage of students that were absent. We were at 99%, which is the same as the state. Attendance and dropout rates. These rates are based on data from the 2018 school year and the 2017 school year, so they are lagging indicators. But the way we're addressing our attendance and our dropout rates, right now what we're doing is we have district-wide initiatives that have been put in place by Ms. Christina Woody, who is our attendance coordinator, and Dr. Monica Valadez. We continue to monitor students' absences. Our case managers and our parent liaisons continue to communicate with our families. They continue to have their pláticas and their dialogues so we can support the families and provide resources so we can ensure that our students are beginning to come to school and remain in school. And we also send those letters out starting at the 3rd absence. Again, lagging indicators for the dropout rates. We do not have any dropouts in the 7th and 8th grade, but we do have areas of concern in years 2017 and 2018. Addressing these issues as well, We're looking at potentially bringing you, starting maybe an evening learning studio or a night school for next year, so we can offer flexible schedules for our students. Our population that falls in this category are our English learners, and we need to provide a schedule to where students have the opportunity to continue and they're able to graduate. They may be going through something at home where they're having to provide for their family, so continuing those conversations and looking into those factors and connecting the family to support services. And also cross-pollinating or using an interdisciplinary approach where programs such as special ed and AVID work together so we can continue with multi-tiered levels of support for all students. This is our graduation rate longitudinal data. The longitudinal data simply means that students graduate with their cohort. If they do not graduate with their cohort, then we refer to them as annual graduates. Those are students who graduate in a year no matter when they started in high school. So looking at this, we have our four-year class of 2017 and 2018. In 2018, our graduation rate went up to 89.4. Our five-year graduates, if you look at the graduation, annual graduate of 2016, those are students who started in the fall of 2011, and they should have been in the cohort of 2015. For 2017, those are students who graduated, who entered school in the fall of 2012 and should have graduated in 2016. Our six-year annual graduates for 2015 entered school in the fall of 2009, and they were with a cohort of 2013. And our six-year annual graduates for 2016 entered in the fall of 2010, and they were the cohort of 2014. So our current graduation plan rates, we have our Foundations High School plan, our Foundation High School plan with endorsement and the CTE endorsement, and our Foundations High School plan with distinguished level of achievement. And then we have still, prior to Foundations coming into play, we have the minimum recommended and distinguished achievement. Those were for students who entered in the fall of 2013. They were the graduating class of 2017, but we'll still have some of those diplomas or programs appear on our taper until the 2020 accountability is set in place, because they will be part of either the 5-year or 6-year longitudinal data information. So our graduation rates, this is by diploma. As you can see, our highest graduation plan is still our Foundations distinguished levels of achievement with 70.1 on your taper report. Thank you, Mr. Arredondo, for pointing this out. The Foundation High School plan is actually 24% and not 2.4%. That's why it wasn't adding up to 100. And then you can see where we still have some under the minimum recommended plan. Post-secondary readiness on page 17 of your taper or page 52 of your board book. As we look at this under CCMR, we had 47.8% for the class of 2018. For the class of 2019, we should be at approximately 62.9%, maybe a little bit higher. That data is not official yet. We're still having to comb through that. CTE, we were at 34.3%. This is also the year where the state started making those changes mid-year, and so we had already gone through the year. So it's at 34.3%. That was approximately 24 certificates. In 2019, we had 64 industry-based certificates, and in 2020, we're already surpassing that. Then we have our career and military at 26%, and then we have our college-ready graduates at 30.7. College-ready simply means any student who earns the scores on their TSIA test, earns dual credit, earns an associate's degree. or they earn the performance score on their SAT and ACT. One of the things that we're doing for next year is we're working with the Dana Center, and we'll be offering one of the Math College Ready courses, and they'll be providing the curriculum, so that will also count towards our accountability system. Also, if you look at page 19 of the taper, you'll see where our CTE program outperformed the state. I think the state was 58.4 and we had 69.1%, and so that's another highlight. Student information profile. This basically includes student enrollment by grade level, ethnicity, student group, and students with disabilities. This is on page 22. If you look at the bottom of page 22, it also has that information broken up by type of disability. We had 8,086 students enrolled again on October 28th, 2018, which was our snapshot date. Then we have our staff information. The two that you see under no degree, those are our CTE teachers. They've come from industry, but yet they meet the requirements from the state to teach in their specialized field. So this is our profile of staff on page 24 of the taper. Also on page 24, we have the staff information with years of experience. You'll notice that we have the most teachers in years 1 through 5 and 6 through 10. And then we have it broken up by program, by CTE teachers, EL teachers, GT teachers, our regular ed, our SPED teachers, other teachers. Others simply means those special duty teachers such as long-term subs. That's how that's recorded there. And then we have the program by student enrollment. We have roughly 2,215 for 2018-2019 school year in CTE. Our financial data was presented by Mr. Barton in October. The school district received an A first rating. Our accreditation status, we're accredited. Those are all of the factors that are used to make that determination. And again, at the end where it says PBMAS, that has been replaced with results-driven accountability. Then we have our campus performance objectives. Ms. Dre provided you with a summary that was up at the dais. Again, these are the campus improvement plans, the district improvement plan, and the targeted improvement plan that were approved back in October and November. There really are no guidelines from TEA other than they wanted us to mention it. We do review our plans every 90 days in cycles to see if campuses have met those progress measures. You did hear some of our leaders back in November do a presentation on cycle 1. Our next cycle ends on February 28th, and we'll be reviewing those plans again to see where we are based on the metrics that we had set forth. Violent or criminal incidents on campuses. These are students on campuses. In a moment on this chart, you'll notice any column with an asterisk means that the numbers were low and cannot be reported because it could reveal identity of individuals. You'll see that we did have 20 incidences of felony controlled substance violations. Student performance in post-secondary institutions. This is based on data from the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, and this is the most current report for our 2017 graduates. So as you see here, class of 2017, they wait 1 full year and then they go back and they collect the data. So out of that class, there were 140 students that were identified through their ID at a 4-year public university. You see the grade point averages, students that had less than a 2.0 or between a 2.0 and a 2.49 or greater than a 2.5 or unknown. You have your two-year public colleges, which are our junior colleges or community colleges, and then you have independent colleges and universities, which are our private universities. Not trackable means that students did not have a trackable ID for Texas higher education, so they were not able to be tracked where they are. And then not found means that they weren't found in the specified year. They could be in the workforce, they could be at a trade school, they could be at a private university that uses a different ID or out of state, or they could be in the military. The Texas Education Agency is working with the Department of Defense so we can come up with a more improved system of identifying students who join the military. You have the taper glossary at the end, and then all of the notebooks. We have hard copies of notebooks. They're about 300 pages. They will be at every campus and at central office. This is all on our website. The data for this current school year will be presented in February of 2021 and then February of 2022. So.
Let's lead us off. Questions?
I'm not sure what, excuse me.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure whether it should be a question or not. I'm just looking at, always have, my interest has been on attendance dropout rate. Maybe might be a better plan to maybe have a report provided to the board regarding the dropout rates. And I know that we have talked about having we do have a coordinator, a dropout coordinator, is that correct, Ms. Reese?
Yes, ma'am.
Dr.
Miss
Reese?
Christina Woody, right here.
So we had talked about in the past, there had been a coordinator working with individuals that were not either coming to school or had dropped out of school. I'm just interested to see, besides the coordinator, what basically is going on, what are we doing, because that's always been a high rate in that dropout rate.
Right.
I just want to have some kind of idea as to what it is going on, especially since it's reportable here at the high school, the 9th grade to 12th grade, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
2.7%, this is for 2018, and I'm assuming it's, might even be the same or higher for 2019.
It was a significant jump from 1.5% to 2.7%.
Yeah.
So you would like some more information on
I'd
that?
like some more information on that regarding what it is, some of the tests that are being performed in that, and who's working on that. Really would like that. The other thing is regarding, what caught my attention right now is the high school graduation, not the high school, the report from the post-secondary institutions. So we had in 2017, is that correct? This is 2016 or 2017? 2017. We had 530 high school graduates, a total of students that graduated. And out of that number, only 140 were identified.
Right.
And the performance rate of what they have here, the two-year colleges, we have independent colleges, 9 non-trackable, and then not found, 268.
Right.
What kind of process do we have in place for when a student, how do you find these? Do you just, is that based on data that we have as to where they're registered or where they're in the admission process, and then you follow up with that?
Yes,
And
it
so
goes
the other
through
ones don't do
Clearinghouse.
anything?
So it goes through Clearinghouse, and it's only for the state of Texas if they're given an ID number that goes through that Texas Higher Education Board, and they're able to use them. They could be in a private college, but it may not be reported to the Texas Higher Education Board.
So that 268 could be part of that as well, when you
Yes.
say it's not reported.
Yes,
So maybe this 268 number is misleading in itself,
it is misleading.
because it's a very high number.
Right. But the number of graduates went up because last year's taper, I think we only had like 98 that we had shown going to a 4-year university. So it's gone up. So that's
From the
good.
prior year?
Yes, so that was with the class of 2016.
Do you remember the number of students that graduated in 2016?
I can look that up for you.
Alright. I just have some concern in regarding that as far as the number of students that we're not being able to find. It just gives it a number that, you know, well, we only could identify 140 out of 530 students that graduated.
That's a low number.
That enrolled in a
That enrolled
That
in a
enrolled,
school.
yeah.
college.
That
So
enrolled in-
presumably, the lion's share of the 268 and the 24 are entered the workforce or otherwise did not continue their
Yeah,
education.
and that would be 300
went
and
to
what,
Trade school.
92, almost.
public
Or they may not have
university.
gone to
Texas
school that
University.
year.
Students.
That doesn't report, because independent colleges and universities, we did have 9. I would say out of that 292, we maybe have 1 or 2 that went to some private school that doesn't report. This is my very non-scientific number, but it's very low. We know that for sure. We know
Yes,
the
we know
bulk
that.
of those 300 some didn't. And I'm concerned too, as you know, further in this report, that we only had 73 out of 530. And Ms. Costilla, you asked the graduating class. Down there at the bottom, it does have the total high school graduation number is 530. So we had
Yes.
73. That's about
Very low
14%
percentage.
that went to a four-year
Four-year
school
college,
and were
yeah.
not on scholastic probation or failed out
Mm-hmm.
after a freshman year. That's terrible. I mean, as far as how many kids, and this is my son's class, Owen's class. So, I mean, it was 72 plus him, but still, it's just terrible because we're trying to set these kids up to be successful in higher ed and move on among our many goals, and we're successful. And this is the best measure of how we do, because everything else we are either internally tracking or it's in progress. 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, that's not finished. But these are actual products of the high school that completed, presumably maybe 13 years in the system or in a system and finished here. And, our goal was met 1 out of 7 times. That number really haunted me in my taper review. Sorry to jump on your question, Ms. Castillo.
No, that's fine. Go ahead. I want to give everybody else the opportunity. I had another question, but that's
Okay, we'll come back, Mr. Arredondo.
Thank you, President McLaughlin. Dr. Ruiz Mills, my colleagues on the board, taper part 5, college career military readiness and post-secondary readiness rates, class of 2018. For purposes of this conversation, Dr. Ruiz Mills, will you explain how these 4 categories are defined and how they are calculated? When we say that 47.8% of the class of 2018 was college, career, and military ready, what does that mean and how was that number calculated?
So that's calculated based on the amount of students that were earning CCMR, right? Based on SAT, ACT, did they take the TSIA, how many dual credit courses or AP courses did they take, and did they earn that proficiency measure? So that's how that is calculated there. And so these are rates. I don't have the actual numbers in front of me, but these are the performance rates. So they take the percentage of that.
Okay, similarly for college, for CTE designation on this slide, what does it mean when 34.3% of our graduates are recognized for CTE?
So the 34.3 meant that at that particular time, and Mr. Doyle can correct me if I'm wrong, they earned their certification because this was still part of the coherent sequence before it got moved to the industry-based certification. And Mr. Doyle, I can defer that question over to him.
Yes, Dr. Reese Mills is correct that 34.3% indicates that a student met CCMR post-secondary readiness through either being in the coherent sequence or earning that certification.
So these parameters, I'm sorry.
Will you say the first part one more time?
So that means that those students were a part of a coherent sequence. Remember, before the change, those students, if they were in that coherent sequence of CT courses, were able to earn.
So if I took 34 courses in X CTE program, if that was a coherent course schedule, the school district, the ISD, would get credit for that.
Correct.
If I did not receive certification, if I was in it for 4 years and at the end exited the system but did not get any type of certification, I did not pass a certification test, the ISD would still get credit because I followed a coherent course sequence.
That was the rule, and remember, it changed. It changed from getting that, a district would be recognized for following that coherent sequence to those students receiving half a point in CCMR to now the rating is for industry-based certifications.
And of this 34.3%, are we being, how much is that us being recognized for coherent course sequence and students receiving certification in their CTE class?
I would have to break that out for you, and I can, to give you some detail.
Thank you.
Ms. Cantu?
The parameters are set by TEA. We don't have anything to do with setting the parameters, right?
Correct.
So they're not.
We follow guidelines and parameters that TEA provide.
I do have another question on attendance. You all-
Can we deal with the CTE questions,
Okay.
if y'all don't mind, while
First-
Mr. Doyle's
okay.
up here? Ms.
I think-
Fialpando, did you have one? Or?
Well, I'd just like to remind everybody, I know that it looks like we're graduating students and they're not going to college, but we do have a college and career ready, so some of those students probably are following their certifications and going into a career. I attended a workshop where some of the students that are getting the certifications are making more money than if they went to college and graduated. So we gotta not just talk about, those that aren't able to go to college. Some are getting certifications that the industry pays more. So that was very evident at Mr. Cardona at the workshop that we were.
Ms. Castillo?
I have two things. On the CTE number, that 34.3%. So, what is the actual number to get the 34.3%? What are we looking at?
So these are the rates. The actual numbers will have to.
Are we talking about how many students
Yeah,
is that involved?
So that would have been 24 students for this class of 2018, because that's when they changed everything in the middle of the year.
So it's less than half of those 24, is that correct?
So no, the 34.3 are the 24 students.
Oh,
that fell.
okay, all right, so there's another number there.
34, the 34.3
This
are the
represents
24
students.
that fall
Okay,
into
so,
the change that the TEA had made.
okay, so there's a higher number that for some reason we don't have.
There was a higher number, but then TEA changed the standard in the middle of the year.
Okay. My other question in regards to, I think I'm gonna follow up with, Ms. Villalpando, is that, I don't think, from my perspective, I'm not looking at the fact as graduation rates are concerned. Yes, it's important. I think it's always been my push that, yes, we're looking at our graduation rates, but we need to make sure that those students that are graduating are adequately prepared. For me, that's really important. And not everybody is college bound. We're talking about the CTE programs, and that's fantastic. It's just that my concern is that the performance of the students that are going to college, that elect to go to college, and how they're doing. And of course, maybe we could have a higher number of CTE students that are going into the workforce because they have a certification. So that's my interest that in regards to that.
Ms. Halsey?
Yes, thank you. So on this slide, I'm wondering that 47.8%, are the 34.3, the 26, and the 30, are they included in that 47?
Sorry, say that.
Up here, the first column, are the second,
CCM.
third, and fourth columns included in the CCMR?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. And then my other question is, if we are determining whether or not students are career and military ready, are we not also tracking whether or not they go into the military, and why isn't that number showing up?
Because at first, it was just if they had the intent to go or if they had signed up. That's why TEA is now working with the Department of Defense to also get them a trackable ID number, so we can, because we know there are probably students that join that we weren't able to get that information. So by giving them a trackable ID number, it'll count towards our military.
So prior to this year, TA has not tracked whether students went actually enlisted?
No.
And that's what has gotten certain districts in trouble, because certain districts have, if a recruiter talked to a kid, they would list that, so they got credit. You
Right.
see Hearn ISD, like 50% of their graduates were military ready, but not necessarily 50% went in. So we held the line of saying, unless we had somebody who actually committed while they were in high school, we had the paperwork, then they got credit for that. So we if they graduated and they entered, up until recently, TEA we had no way of knowing. So I kept telling them, like, I think we have more kids going into the military than we know, but they don't go in until after they graduate. And so TEA, I think, recognized that across the state, and now is working with the Department of Defense to say, can we see who's going into the military?
Thanks.
Okay, anything else, are you back to attendance? So I want to make sure I understand this right, because Ms. Viapondo made a point that some of our kids may be not going to college because they're getting high-paying industry jobs. But there were 24 kids that received CTE certification. Is that the correct number of the frequency? Taken, not percentage, but
That's
children.
the number.
That's a percentage, the
So, but some of those 24 could have gone on to college. They could have received a certification
Right.
and gone on to college. Do we know how many did that?
I can track.
He can get that information.
That would be
for
helpful,
us.
because then I would know if it was all 24, then I could say, okay, to Ms. Viapondo's point, we did have 73 go on to first-year college success, and then we had, say, 24 that may have been entering high-paying fields. But if 22 of those 24 are among the college entries, then we're dealing with a vanishingly small number, not something we should set policy on, in my view. Mr. Ardono?
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Similarly, time and time again for the past several years, when we have received the taper report from TEA, some of my colleagues have referenced that these 200, 300 students that go missing after they graduate might be, at some private, picturesque liberal arts college off the coast of Cape Cod. But quite frankly, that's not the case. We know where these 300 or so students go every year. And it's becoming increasingly frustrating year after year when we say, well, these probably have high-paying jobs somewhere in the workforce and we just lost them, or they're going out of state colleges. We know where they are. And a lion's share of them we probably did not prepare them for life after high school. So moving forward, in regards to this reporting, it's clear that TEA isn't going to do the work for us when it comes to our students exiting the system. I don't know what it looks like starting now, but I would like to see ISD resources allocated and committed to tracking these students as they exit our system. Like Mr. McLaughlin said, it's difficult to set policy when we can account for 300 plus of our graduates every year. We don't know if we should invest in college or career readiness or military readiness or technical training or whatever that looks like as of right now. We talk about our students being workforce ready. I highly doubt that we're making sure our students who exit the system, who are entering the workforce, have job placement as they exit the system. We say that they're workforce ready, but do they have a job when they leave? And so, yielding the rest of my time, I would like to see more done to track these students rather than all of us every year going through this exercise of trying to justify why 300 of our graduates go missing every year and where they might be.
Ms. Cantu, you had a question on attendance?
I just have a quick question. We said that after their third absence, they get a letter. At what point do you start the home visits?
Ms. Woody? Ms. Woody has been working on attendance plans with our campus leaders, so she can talk more in detail.
Hi, good evening. So after 3, we're still kind of keeping up with them. We contact them through letters, through the phone. Once they get to 5, we have attendance committee meetings, and those entail counselors, admin, teachers, parents, kids, and our parent liaisons. Our parent liaisons kind of are there to create support. So whenever we figure out what the barrier is, if that's getting them a mentor, if it's a physical thing like housing or whatever it is, we're able to do that. We start making home visits at that point. Some campuses do it before that, but all campuses will start doing it at 5.
I guess I'm trying to relate it to the report we had previously about the number of students who lost credit due to attendance. And that number was a really high number. So that would keep a person very busy if you're doing home visits. And we really don't want our students losing credit, so the sooner we can get them back into school, and then we wouldn't have the situation with 800 kids losing credit.
I agree with you. And just last week, I met with a bunch of stakeholders at the high school. So they have a campus admin whose job is just really to do those home visits, and he does that with the registrar as well. We went through all the freshmen, especially the ones that are second and third years, and really trying to track what we're doing for those kids and making sure that we're doing home visits, and they're tracking that. They're tracking the outcome of that, and so we're looking at all of that data. And we're trying to figure out how to make it better next year, right? So we started this, I came on board in October, so what we can do as we're reflecting through this process to make it even better in the upcoming years.
Thank you.
Ms. Castillo?
Just a quick question. Dr. Reese, or attendance-wise, where do we have a better attendance, at the elementary level or secondary level?
Both of our middle schools are actually trending up almost a percentage from last year. Most of our elementaries are doing well too. So I would say it's really a lot of our pre-K, and so we're really trying to be proactive in that and creating those habits of coming to school. I think a lot of times we're reactive about attendance, and so the sooner we can catch them and create those habits, the better, in our high school. So it's
And the high
top and
school,
bottom.
it's at the bottom and at the top.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Hanson?
I believe with Ms. Villapondo that as far as where our students go, it'd be nice if Texas Education Agency helped us more trying to figure out where students, because we're not the only one having this problem. We can only assume where students go. We do know some students are getting well-paying jobs, and some students do go out of state or attend private universities that don't connect to the system. So it would be helpful if TA or whoever else can help us track that better. Do students, by any chance, when they graduate, give any kind of an intention? I mean, I know, looking in May, we see all the kids, I'm going to so-and-so college or whatever it is. It'd be nice if maybe all of our students could be surveyed individually to see what their plans are. Not that those might change, but that would kind of give us a better idea, since right now we're at a loss.
So I'll meet with our Gear Up coordinators and see what previous Gear Up cohorts have done, because that's actually part of what our coordinators will do once their students graduate, and they'll track them for 1 year. So we'll see what other systems Gear Up has in place that maybe we could utilize. But note that when we're tracking our students, I can provide that information, but it won't change what Taper collects.
Sure.
But at least we'll have a better understanding.
We can know what's going on in our district.
Yes.
It may not be what TA says is going on, but
Right.
it might be a better idea for us at this point.
Right,
to
so
catch up.
we'll look at that.
Thank you.
Ms. Halsey?
Are we consistently across all campuses using the same criteria for what constitutes an excused absence and what doesn't? And do we require a doctor's note? Sort of, how does that all work?
So that's something we've actually implemented recently. So we have a policy now where after 4 excused absences for parent letters, that they either have to turn in doctor's letters to get to have an excused absence, or we offer our nurses as a resource, because we know that sometimes it may be difficult for people to get to the doctor to get a letter. So we tell and we communicate to parents that they can bring their child to the school, and the nurse can tell them if they're well enough to stay or to go home. And that's something we're implementing across the district
After 4?
after 4.
Thank you.
Ms. Cantu, did you have your hand raised?
Yes,
You got the question?
I'm good.
What
Oh,
else?
I know.
Go ahead.
Since Gear Up, you mentioned Gear Up, and they have part of their grant is doing the following year tracking. So is Gear Up going to provide resources for that? Do you know?
Yes.
Should we ask Gear Up?
UT
people?
Gear Up Grant will provide the resources for our coordinators to follow those students and track them for 1 whole year.
So they'll have a different tracking than what we use for ours?
They may have something different than the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. So I'll have them look into see what some of the coordinators are doing around the state that are having to track the students right now in that first year, and see if that's something we can implement for us.
Thank you.
Ms. Cruz-Mills, I have a couple more things. I don't know if any of my colleagues, no, we're all clear. So I dug through, I appreciate your summary and your report. I went through the actual report myself, and it was alarming to me that, I mean, I think last year I saw the report and I specifically remember saying that there were green shoots of growth, but this year there are not. And what I did see just seemed to have withered and died. When you look at where we are compared to state averages, the gap between San Marcos and the state increased, meaning we're further behind in every grade that was measured except third grade. And as an individual trustee, it just made me sick to my stomach to see that, because we've now been in, the third year of an administrative regime. We've had turnover. Every one of the cabinet positions, I was on the board at the time that position was individually approved. We've had changes in campus administrators and in probably half of our campuses in the principal, and yet we're moving backwards. So is there something that you can point me to that would make me feel better?
Yes. We've been going through our diagnostic visits with our Region 13 representative that's overseeing our campuses, utilizing the effective school framework. They have looked at all areas of our curriculum. They have looked at our assessments. They have gone into classrooms. They have said that everything that we have in place, our TEKS resources, the alignment to the rigor of the TEKS, all of the assessments, the instruction that's going on in the classroom, specifically the interventions, they are saying all of those are on par or above. They're stating that the area of focus now needs to be on the Tier 1 instruction, which is what we've been talking about, and fidelity to the curriculum. It's taken 4 years for everybody to start realizing that we need to use TEKS resources, utilizing our lesson plan development. I will say that part of the reason that our scores dipped is because I think people were becoming confident, but they weren't detailing what those lessons had to look like, and they weren't detailing how to plan for the reteach, because that reteach is monumental in ensuring that a student understands. So that is the first thing. The second thing, and we have them down still as our areas of measure, is 5.1 and 5.3, looking at our data-driven instruction and utilizing our PLCs accordingly. Because sometimes we will sit there and we'll listen to our PLCs, and teachers will say, oh yes, I looked at the data and I saw this, but what is the data telling you? How is that going to improve your practice? How is it going to engage the student, and how are we going to approach it differently? So you're absolutely right. We did take a dip. We did dip in classes or in subjects where we were utilizing our tests from the state, the interim assessments, and even those weren't written on par. So now we're going back, and we've focused on the small groups. We had Saturday schools going on, the instruction in the class. We've been in classrooms. I've done about 800 walkthroughs thus far. And so we're all responsible for campuses and supporting our teachers and our principals, but most importantly, supporting our young scholars. So that's what we're doing, but we all have to realize that utilizing the curriculum and planning the instruction and teaching it not one way but multiple ways for that differentiation is what's going to get us to that next level. Because even our monitor has said there is no reason why we should have had a D or an F-rated school or D domain campuses with the systems we have in place. And so that's where we are right now, and that's the push that we're doing, and I feel your frustration as well.
Okay, I have two more specific questions
Okay.
before we're done. On the report on violent or criminal incidents,
Yes.
I first want to understand the masking. Is that like that's a state law that you
That's a
can't
state
show
law.
us how many there are?
Yes.
And then it seemed like assault, that there were several numbered crimes that were not included, one of which seemed to be assault, like simple assault. And that number I'm figuring is fairly significant, but it wasn't included in the report. How did you determine which of these to share and which not to share?
So the state pulls them from our PEMS database. We have our local codes and then we have our state codes, right? And so they pull it from PEMS. And so whatever is in PEMS, that means that's not the right word. It's not a state code. What is it called? Yeah, it is. Okay, I was right. Good. So they pull those state codes and that's where they get it from. So if it was.
It's not on here, the state didn't give it to us?
That's right, because we didn't report it that way because it may not have been an assault. And so where's Yvette? So she'll be able to answer that. But we did have the 20 felony controlled substances.
So what is reported through the state code is an assault with bodily injury. If there was no bodily injury, it was simple assault, that's not coded through the state. It would be coded through our local codes, which would be a punch, hit, kick, whatever.
Well, I didn't see assault with bodily injury on the report. I saw aggravated assault, which usually means a weapon's involved.
Right, we didn't have but
Right.
one or two of those, so.
Of an assault with bodily injury?
An aggravated assault.
Yeah, right, but what about assault with bodily injury? Is that a number we get from the state?
Yes, that would be.
And so why wasn't it on the report?
So it's separated into assault of a school employee, you should have that number.
I see that one.
And the other one is assault of someone other than a school employee, you should have that number as well.
So, well, I have aggravated, but I don't have assault with bodily injury as to a school employee or a non-school employee.
Yeah, it just reports aggravated, it doesn't.
Meaning we don't know the number on the others,
We could get it for you.
but it's not given to us by the state in our PEMS.
Right.
Pulled into PEMS.
Okay, that, I was mainly worried that there was something, I was ensuring that I was getting all of the information we got, so I appreciate that.
Yes.
I think this is my last thing. Still, go Ms. Costilla.
No, do you want to go?
No, go ahead.
Just a comment. I understand your frustration, Mr. McLaughlin, and I think I've been on this board long enough to understand that and go through all that. We had an audit report done when in 2014?
Yes.
And that was, it's been, 6 years now that we've had that report?
We
I don't know
began
whether
working
maybe
on it
it's
in
something that we should
2017.
consider at this point in time to let us know overall how we're doing, where we're going in regards, whether, there were a lot of academic deficiencies in that report that we got. Yes, it is 6 years, but I'm not sure, when we have systems take time to really undergo towards a good positive change. So I'm not sure whether maybe the board would be, agreeable to maybe requesting a audit report as to where we are academically, to where maybe everybody will be comfortable with that, specifically the issues that you have brought up. I don't know whether this is something maybe that this board would like to consider. Well, I don't even know the cost of that audit report. I know that we're here for quite a while for that audit report to get completed. I don't know what the cost is for an audit report. What TA came in?
$3,000.
Region 13, when they finish their diagnostic at the end of this year, will also provide something.
So they will provide something for us to,
Recommendations.
so, this might be something that the board might want to look at to see where we are, because, we did have a very negative and a very deficient audit report way back in 2014. Academic-wise,
Maybe when we see what Region 13 provides, we can
maybe that
determine
might be
if
an indication
there's
for us to.
should be
this is what
additional
we need to do.
investment.
Another thing would be to actually complete Lone Star governance, because part of the Lone Star governance training that we started actually sets the goal, the North Star for the district, and until that happens, we're gonna keep having these discussions, right? Because then my evaluation becomes all about data, and like actually setting a goal of, I wanna see a 3% increase in reading and math, right? So we, as a team of 8, have a responsibility to finish that Lone Star governance training to ensure that if we're asking, the people that we've replaced, that we model that same, like, our board meeting needs to become about student outcomes. Until that happens, then we're gonna keep talking about this and not focusing laser. And you're gonna have teachers that have resisted tier 1 instruction or in implementing, the things we've put in place. It wasn't until Travis became an F-rated school that it get their attention. You can ask Mr. Massini. It gets your attention when TEA comes in and goes into every one of your classrooms to monitor with the tier 1 instruction. But until we as a board set that example, everything that we're gonna do after this is like up for debate by teachers. If you put as my evaluation, I wanna see a 3% growth in reading or a 4% growth in math, then that's pretty much what our goals are, right? I mean, that's becomes pretty simple. But we went through Lone Star governance training, and then we set that back, and now we bring the taper report up, and then we sit up here and we say, hey, it's really frustrating. I'm frustrated too. I'm ready to go. Let's put my evaluation as all data. And then it's non-negotiable.
Well, I mean, I think it in essence was last time.
No,
data
it's
by
not,
data.
sir. I disagree with you. We need to finish Lone Star governance. We need to meet with the community. We need to have the community set forth what it is we believe in as a district, and part of that is academics. And then there's the monitoring of that. And if that's not a value, then, I mean, academics it's gonna be hard for me as a superintendent to tell teachers and sit up here. You can ask Susan. She had the conversation with her teachers, and she shows the data on growth now, and she took that ownership on, right? Of this is what we're gonna do that's the best for kids. But we as a board have to model that.
Well, we did Lone Star Governance. I take 30 days off a year, and in 2019, 2 of them were for Lone Star Governance,
Yeah.
and full days. And if us going through the rest of Lone Star Governance, us not doing that is somehow an impediment to classroom performance of students, let's do it tonight. Like, bring them in. I'll stay late. Like, I don't think anybody here is going to do anything that stands in the way. But what we understood was we would have to make a significant investment to do the remainder of that training. It was largely going into a community, having meetings where they say, yes, academics matters, and then coming back and using that to shape something. But we already set goals that all students would graduate college and career ready. We did that 4 years ago, and we are further from that goal than or 3 years ago, we're further from that goal than we were the day we set it. So I don't know that us sitting up here and setting additional goals, I mean, we've been doing that, and we're not getting there.
But that's not a goal. A goal is by 2020, 3% of our kids will increase by this X amount to this amount. 100% of our kids graduating career and college ready. Like, I don't know any district that has met that goal across the nation. Like, unless you're a private school and you kick kids out, or your idea, you determine what you want to do. Now, we haven't set SMART goals. Like, we have not said by this time we need to be at this place. That's what I mean. Maybe we're talking semantics, but
I don't think so. When we set the goal that we wanted to aim for every child to be college and career ready, my understanding was the administration would then set incremental goals of reaching that overarching goal. So I didn't know I was supposed to say, oh, well, it should be 3% this year and 4%. I don't know. Y'all are the professionals. I just know we move further from the goal, and that's all I can evaluate.
and I'm giving you my advice on what it's going to take to move the system incrementally to reach your goal, which I agree with.
Let's do some Lone Star governance.
In March, we'll be presenting our Cycle 2 data, so you'll be seeing that as well on the second 90 days.
Ms. Hanson?
Mr. Cardona, can you email all of us what is the next step as far as the governor's training? What do we have to do each?
Yes, I will get that to you.
If we have 4 things to do or 5, and what amount of time is required for each one?
I can get that for you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Rees-Mills, before I let you go, in prior years you've given us a update during paper on how children that went to Bonham Pre-K did on 3rd grade test performance as compared to children that did not go to Bonham Pre-K. Do you have that number?
So those students are in third grade. I'm
They're
thinking
the
dual
first or in
language.
fourth,
So
right?
yeah, we can pull that for you.
Okay,
I can
I'd
pull
like
that
to see
for you.
that. Thank
Okay.
you. Anything else?
And next month, we'll get results on all those students that gained their credit.
Mr. McLaughlin.
I'm gonna go to Ms. Castillo
Well,
first. Ms.
don't
Castillo?
Mr.
Oh, Mr.
Arredondo,
Arredondo, go ahead.
Thank you, President McLaughlin, and thank you, Trustee Costilla. To echo Mr. McLaughlin's, I guess, frustration and concern, I too have felt that as I look over this taper report, that my work and my advocacy and my support for this administration is somehow disconnected from student achievement, and I think the goals that we all share. And quite frankly, as we move to contract renewals and extensions, that frustration is going to carry over into that process. Historically, when the administration has brought forward contract renewals for both individual campuses and campus and district-wide leadership, I have been in support of those. And time again, I hear from Dr. Ruiz-Mills and even our superintendent of schools that some people are just not buying into the vision of the district and the things in which I believe all 8 of my colleagues on this dais believe in. And I just, as we move forward, want to echo that sentiment to staff at all levels that, we look at these numbers at a macro level and we talk about dropouts here, students not performing at grade level, but I think a lot of times we forget that the numbers that represent failing students are actual kids with families and with futures. And there's a reason why we have generational poverty in this community, and it's because the rubber has not met the road in our San Marcos public schools for generations. And I've now sat up here for 5 years, playing into that system of generational poverty, and enough is enough. And so, Mr. Superintendent, as we move forward, know that you have my support when it comes to doing the things that need to be done to make sure that we have the best employees at all levels, cabinet down, to food service, transportation, and custodians, to make sure that our students are achieving where we know that they can be.
Ms. Castillo?
Well, my comments are generally along the same lines as Trustee Arredondo. I was just going to comment that we can set all goals that we want to. We can set measurements as far as the 3%, but ultimately, it's like the underlying issue here is having buy-in from our teachers for this curriculum. Dr. Reese mentioned the fact that and I think the superintendent did too, about teachers, our staff, our faculty following and doing the alignment with the TEKS, doing what we can. But ultimately, if it's not being done by a large majority, we can set all the numbers we want to, all the measurements we want to, and it's not going to get accomplished. So how do we go forward with that? How do we make sure that all our teachers, all our faculty, have high expectations of our students as well, and reach those high expectations? I mean, we can sit here all we want to and identify those numbers, but ultimately we're not out there in the trenches, and they're not out there in the trenches. It's our faculty that are hopefully maybe a greater number that are committed and working with our students to make sure that they are being prepared, not just adequately, but more than adequately prepared to be able to be successful in whatever they do, whether it's a job, whether it's a vocation, whether it's a 4-year or 2-year college. It's just a matter of being successful there.
I think I agree with the sentiment, but I push back on painting a broad brush of faculty, like just generally faculty not buying in. My experience daily interacting with faculty is we have a large number of faculty working extremely hard and seeming to buy into our system.
I'm not denying that.
Right.
I'm just saying
so
that.
It's really our administration at the campus and district level that if someone isn't, and if someone's not giving kids in their class everything that they need that year to be successful, why are they still here? It's been 3 years. I don't think we can say as a overall say, well, it's that faculty, they're not listening to us. If they're not, you are completely empowered to take care of it. We have not overridden a termination for cause on base of performance that I can recall in my 5 years here. We haven't had any come back to us from the state as being premature or improper. Haven't lost a lawsuit. I mean, I think if anything, take care of it. But we can't say faculty, and then the only ones that are listening are the ones that are working hard, and then it's, oh, we're getting blamed again, when it's really a small subset of that group that we just need to move on.
Now, keep in mind, Mr. McLaughlin, for many years in the past, that was not a process that was even utilized as far as teachers not performing at the level that they needed to be done. It's just okay, you go on and you go on from year after year after year. I mean, I'm just telling you from what my experience is and what I've seen and saw. I mean, that I've heard.
I
So.
still get that list of 580
I know.
every year. I mean, make it 480 and deal with folks who you do not believe are performing.
Well, my performance for me is very important. I do believe that a lot of our teachers are doing, the majority of the teachers, I think, are doing a wonderful job. For those that are not, I'm not out to fire anybody, but if they need help in order to help them do better in the classroom, I think we need to be sure that we identify that process and put them on, and make sure that we are providing them with all the resources that we can so they can be successful. And if they cannot, well then, there's no other alternative but to let them go. But at least try to get them, because I feel that there are some teachers that can be more productive than anything else. It's just that, we need to help them. We need to make sure so they can make sure that they're successful in doing the thing they need to be doing in the classroom for the success of our kids.
All right. Thank you. Item 6B, construction update.
Good evening, trustees. We have our monthly construction update. Feel free to stop me at any point because each project is a little bit different. This is the bond budget reconciled through February. We talked about closing projects at our last meeting and understanding the different criteria that goes into that. I wanted you to see the system that's in place and the different things that hold that up and who's responsible for each element. The school district admittedly has a bureaucracy, so does every contractor, so does an architect. The paperwork has to flow through a lot of different directions, and we still haven't received our last set of bills for even Rodriguez. It does take some time, but we will propose to the board to close our first project, the Transportation Annex, this evening. This is the regular checklist you're used to seeing for each project, when the different benchmarks were met, and tallying up the weather days. And then breaking out our individual projects. Our Transportation Annex is complete. Rodriguez, we are finishing up our warranty items, but it is progressing towards closing out very quickly. Our 5 campus renovation, the roof lines continue to be an issue that is being discussed. Not sure why we're going in and out there. And individual punch list items are being handled.
So we have more than Travis having the roof lines not?
All 3 roof lines, all 3 campuses where there was a roof line issue are being
Wow.
discussed. Yes, ma'am. In your report, you can see, and the screen will come back shortly, the San Marcos High School progress update. It is mostly site work at this point, things on the outside and working on the details inside in the evenings and on weekends. Here's some pictures. The millwork going into the construction trades and the site work outside. Our Miller project is just out of the staging phase. We staged the outside, and they've had to move some classrooms, some offices. We've had to move the fire risers, and a lot of the building systems we've had to address in order to even start the project. They're just at the tail end of that right now. to see that list. It was previously asked how we're helping this project be a little bit more successful and timely than the high school project. Two things, our weekly meetings on site with the personnel of Weber, but also we've added to that now monthly meetings with Weber leadership. And they come into San Marcos and we sit down and we look at the overview and the progress and the roadblocks and we talk about that. It was actually a really great meeting last week. Again, they had to displace and do some demos so they can get started there. We had to move our alarm panels, fencing and staging. And finally, our Days of Olive project, we expect the notice to proceed very quickly here at the very beginning of March. And the final project, we are moving really quickly on, hoping to bring to you in April. And that's going to be a really small project, about $2.7 million for roofing and some work on the cafeteria at Goodnight.
Mr. Redondo?
Thank you, President McLaughlin. My colleagues on the board, this is the slide that we get every month. It's the chart of the start date, contract date, projected days of completion, scheduled date of completion, weather days, etc. Again, I'm going to ask staff if or when this spreadsheet is ever going to be updated. Based on this right now, it still says that the scheduled date for completion of our high school K addition and renovation is 8/28/2019. Obviously, that date is come and gone by several months. And I understand that millwork is being done and I see the pictures, but again, if I can just see all of these projects, the most up-to-date in all of these columns of where they are and where their scheduled completion dates are. Again, based on what's given by staff, if somebody were to ask me, so all the delays at San Marcos High School for the addition, when is it supposed to be complete? And I look at this page, it says 8/28/2019. So I don't know who on the payroll needs to update this, but please, by the March meeting, please update this spreadsheet and all impacted columns by any delays in construction
I don't
and
know that we want to
ongoing
change the
work.
expected completion date because I think that's an important benchmark for us to keep
Yes.
in mind. But we can definitely add a final completion date, and so that you have that comparison value.
Yeah, so right now it says scheduled date of completion. I understand that that has come and gone, but yes, if we could have like scheduled date of completion part 2 or part 3 or whatever that looks like.
Or
Projected,
revised.
new,
Revised.
updated, scheduled date of completion, whatever that looks like.
We can do that.
Please.
Ms. Halsey?
Yeah, I've been critical on this and frustrated in the past, and so I wanted to say tonight that I've had an opportunity to see some of the finishes at the elementary schools, and they look great, and I've seen staff and students using them and enjoying them. And I also have heard from students at the high school about how much they really appreciate the CTE building, and I think that, you know, even though it took a lot longer than I had hoped, it has really worked out very well. And I also wanted to say that I really appreciate the efforts that have been gone through to have as little stress and disruption as possible at Miller, given the fact that it's a very complex job site and there's not a whole lot of room there to negotiate. So I really appreciate the efforts of everybody to make that happen.
Thank you for that.
Just a request, I don't know, and maybe it's my fault, for maybe I didn't monitor my email, but I picked up my packet today at 11 and this was not in it. Was this supplemented to us?
We prepare that on the Friday before.
Okay.
If I knew you were coming today, I would have had that presentation for you, but we try to give you the most up-to-date information on each individual project. Some of those had punch list items we prepared on the Friday before the board meeting.
If there's a means of getting it in the packet, or at least supplementing the packet with it, yeah, I could be more prepared to, I mean, if I just look at it right here while I'm on the fly, it's kind of difficult for
Yes, sir.
me to give any sort of robust review. Anything else?
Or they could email.
Okay. Yeah.
Just
That's-
email it to us ahead of
Happy
time.
to do that.
That completes our report section. We're gonna take a break and come back at 7:30. But
7:19.
really, we're really gonna do it this time.
7:19.
I always say like 6 minutes and we're wandering.
It's 7:19.
I got you. 11 minutes.
It's early.
Item 7, approval of consent agenda items. Ms. Hanson?
I move that we approve the minutes of the regular scheduled board meeting on January 21st and the special call meeting on February 30th.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion by Hanson, second by Villapando. Any discussion? All in favor? Carries 7-0. Takes us to items for action 8A, consider approval of budget amendments.
We bring you one budget amendment this month. It is to split a salary for an employee who is serving 2 departments. We're just moving the department salary between 2 pay codes.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second that.
Motion approved by Cantu, second by Villapando. All in favor? 7. We're on a roll. 8B, consider approval of SMCISD academic calendar for school year 2020, 2021. Mr. Fernandez, how did democracy fail us?
It's going to be hard to pronounce 2020, 2021. But in your packet, we'll have on page 1, it's the differences and similarities between the 2 calendars. This is also the message that went out to families and staff. On page 2, it's option 1. On page 3, it's option 2. And then on page 4 is the results. So we had 1,137 votes. We had 586 votes for option 1 and 551 votes for option 2.
Real close.
Really close. So option 1 came out with more votes. On the very last page, we added a feature this year. We wanted to see who was voting and who was voting for what. So if you notice, we had 47 students vote, 497 district employees, 552 parents, and 41 community members. And then in the graphs below that, you'll see how they voted. So how many students voted for option 1, district employees, and so on. Option 2 was more traditional to what we've been going with. Ms. Waltman's gonna describe option 1 and how that calendar came to fruition.
Good evening. My name is Beth Waltman. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I have the honor of being the chairperson for DEIC this year, and so I'm going to talk with you about option 1. I think you'll be a little bit excited about it because the major difference in option 1 was that teachers wanted more time for training. We want more time to implement the training that we get, to prepare our lessons that reflect the training. We can actually exercise and apply what it is we're being asked to do. Typically what happens is we get trained and we go to work instead of having time to work through the process. So option 1 primarily is what it is because of teachers wanting more training time. Option 2 is also a return to a cultural priority in that it includes the Monday after Easter, and that has been something we haven't had for quite some time. And we were able to do it this year, and we thought it was very inviting to our community. The way the calendar works, and because we have to start on the 24th, it didn't leave us much leeway except to go into June. But you'll see that we were willing to go into June in order to have more time to prepare to teach, effectively teach.
So option 1 has more teacher work days? Is that what you're saying? They work
Not
more
work days,
in the
Mr.
year?
McLaughlin.
Okay.
Not work days, not days in the classroom working, but days preparing with your teams to develop the lessons, to implement the new training that has come in. So for instance, we get what you were talking about, that training you were going to go to, you're going to go to more of it. Well, you go to it and then you go back to work instead of going to it and designing your lessons so that it includes those new or maybe even rewrapped kinds of training that you've had and implementing them through your lessons into the classroom to work with teachers.
Was there a discussion of how challenging it is for households with 2 working parents or a single parent who works to accommodate for random days off in the middle of the year?
Yes, that's an issue. It's a serious issue. The problem is that we have balance. What is going to happen if we don't make the education piece our priority, and the teachers need the time to be able to prepare to work with the students? I think you'll find that when teachers have the kind of time they need, you're going to find better results.
It's the same number of days, though. They're just spread out differently. They're not working more. They're not going to more training. It's
No.
just in the middle of the year instead of at the beginning and end of the year.
And I think you misunderstand. The beginning of the year will still have the regular training. The thing is, you get the regular training at the beginning of the year, and then you get some new training or some massaging of the training at the first of the year. But then you go straight to work, and you don't have time to pull things together so that you can put in practice those things that you were trained to do. It is not about more training. It is about being able to implement and apply the training.
The timing of the training.
And the timing is,
How many days a year do teachers work? Aren't they in the set number?
It's 187 on both
187.
calendars.
187 on both calendars. So they're not working 192 in option 1, right? It's 187, 187.
Right. So
They're
what
in the
is-
classroom the same number of hours in option 1 and option 2.
What's
It's
your
just how it's
question?
sprinkled throughout, right?
well, it's how it's
Understanding.
divided. No, I'm sorry, I don't want you to misunderstand.
I'm not.
Okay. It is that the days are dedicated for implementing what we have learned, so that our lessons for the students reflect the processes that Dr. Ruiz-Mills was talking about, that we can put PBIS to work, that we can put strategies for bringing up the failures to work, because we don't have that kind of time.
So
And
I'll
we need it.
self-confess, I voted for option 2 on 3 different devices as a parent, community member. So I'm just gonna say that, so I'm not defending Ms. Waltman, but I think what she's trying to say is one of the lessons we've learned of, like we talked earlier about putting in teach resources and curriculum. So one of the trainings that we really been if you remember going back 4 years ago, we had this little crisis happen at the high school, and then we kind of were reacting the whole year. We had the curriculum audit, we started putting in assessments, we started doing all this stuff. We did all this great stuff, AVID, we did all the special ed training, but we never fundamentally went to focus on the PLCs, the professional learning communities. Like, what's the language that teachers are speaking when they get the data, they reflect on the data, they iterate, and they change their instruction to do interventions, tier 1. I think that's what Ms. Waltman is trying to say. Like, we haven't planned out the actual days, but it would be around using data points to then reflect, iterate, and adjust our next few weeks of teaching. Is that close?
And in particularly focused on the campus level. Exactly. What is it that you need for your students so that they can achieve? And we have to deliver that. We don't tend to have that time, and we wanted it. We wanted it to look like this rather than work days.
Mr. Arredondo?
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin, and thank you, Ms. Woltman, for your service on the DEIC. I have several questions regarding the start date and the end date of the proposed 2 calendars. On both calendars, I'm assuming the ISD has already talked with Texas State University in regards to commencement, so either decision will not impact graduation having a space at the university, correct?
Yeah, so we've, Ms. Cooper directly works with Texas State University so for example, on option 1, we would look at that June, Ms. Presley? They've locked in already a few dates reserving for us, so we're gonna call them tomorrow, once the calendar is approved, so we can get San Marcos graduation on their calendar.
Ms. Halsey?
So I had one question, Ms. Waltman, about the March professional learning date. Why is that date scheduled for March rather than February? Is it to help with the retesting? It seemed like very specific, but just because it falls only a week before spring break, I was curious as to.
We were trying to work with the 9-week schedule, because at the end of the 9 weeks is a nice time for teachers and students to be able to pull all of that together, and it falls right before the end of a 9 weeks.
Thanks. And I will express what might not be the most popular opinion, but I think it's absolutely fine to go through the last of the first week of June. I think that I'm very sympathetic to the difficulties that families have in terms of planning for certain days off during the year, but I also know that that first week in June is really a black hole in terms of after-school programming or during the day programming, kids things in the community, and trying to find a place where kids are suddenly going to go that week. So I think I'm in favor of option one.
That
Sure,
was
Donna.
part of our discussion as well, because most of us are parents that serve on the committee.
On the Parent Community Day scheduled for November 2nd, will you explain to me how the DEIC and the calendar committee came up with that date in particular, and of what day of the week that would be?
Okay, on November 2nd, one of the things we're looking at when we schedule this is actually the attendance issues that we're dealing with, and that happens to be the weekend of Halloween. And we have traditionally had a very big hit on that weekend in terms of attendance. So it fell to common sense that putting Parent Community Day would perhaps deflect that attendance issue.
I think that's good.
Ms.
Y'all
Hanson?
took it into consideration.
Okay, I'm assuming the PL days, the 3 on option 1 are what you're talking about implementing.
Professional learning, yes, ma'am.
So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 professional development days before school starts, and 3 throughout. So that's 7. And when I count on option 2, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's it, right?
Combined together, right? Is that what you're saying?
They get them all up in front.
Yeah. So we're doing 7 on option 1 and 6 on option 2?
I see 6 on option 2.
That's what I said.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at option 2, not option 1. Yes, I believe that's the case. We have one right after, we have the PD days right before school, and then the professional learning on October 23rd. And that's another around the grading period. And then one right at January, where we come back to school and we're able to restart with what we were doing and perhaps looking at data, tweak things that we need to be doing better. And then again, right before the spring break and near the grading period in
That actually
March.
gives us 1 more day.
Yes,
for
ma'am.
professional development. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Halsey.
I'd like to move that we accept option 1 for the 2020-2021 academic calendar.
Second.
A motion by Halsey, second by Cantu. Any further discussion? All in favor? 5 opposed. 2. Option 1 carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 8C, consider approval of RFP that allows district funds to be moved into additional local bank depository accounts.
The trustees asked administration to prepare an RFP for their review, discussion, and approval. And that was emailed to you on Friday and also provided to you on colored paper at the dais.
And what were, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
what were the costs to date?
We, the lawyer today has used an hour and a half of his time. We'll get the billing on that in a couple months, but I'm going to project $375.
And do we have an additional cost such as advertising, and we don't have staff costs?
We haven't put that in the paper yet. We'll know that when we do it.
Mr. Arredondo?
Thank you, President McLaughlin. Thank you, Mr. Barton and staff, for compiling this RFP for the trustees to review this evening. A clarifying question for me that I have is, I understand that the ISD currently has a depository contract that's ongoing, that money goes in and comes out for payroll purposes. It was, I guess, my understanding or my hope that if the ISD were to choose another bank, financial institution to deposit money into, that money would not be, I guess, revolving, as a majority of a lion's share of tax pool funds just stays there in perpetuity, earning interest every quarter, yearly, but not all of that is withdrawn frequently. Some of it is, and you've referenced that in previous presentations and conversations, that money is available for the ISD when current things come up. So based on the way that this RFP is written, though, there's a lot of services that we're asking for, like we're going to be frequently withdrawing from this money, or we want to have that money available for us to withdraw. Is that correct?
The liquidity of it is very important to us. However, the frequency that you're describing, we are not intending in the current design to use this as a payroll account or to pay our bills or accounts payable, anything like that. It wasn't designed by the board. You just said bring us something to evaluate and give feedback on, and so if you were to shape it further, we could shape this further. But the intention of this document, I think, is pretty much what you described.
Mm-hmm.
We do ask questions about all the fees. You know, what is your fee schedule for everything? We want to know and we want to compare. But it is not designed, I think, to create a revolving account at all.
Okay, so whatever future funds might be allocated by the board into this financial institution would be static. It would essentially be set for the duration of the contract because we have no intent to withdraw or spend that money. Correct?
I don't think we'd ever want to lock up the district's money and say the district can't access it.
Yeah.
So I definitely want it available to us as many times as necessary, but that's not our intention. You are correct in describing when you see our investment report, there are several tax pool accounts that are pretty much static, is a great word, plus interest each quarter. And so this could be something of that nature.
And I apologize if I misspoke to give the impression that I think that this money is just going to sit there locked in for the duration of the contract. But as of right now, there's no intent from the Board of Trustees or ISD staff that this money will be needed to be utilized for operations on a monthly basis at this time. It would just be deposited there, available to the ISD, but with no intent to be
We
used. Very
expressly
much
do
like
not
tax.
want to enter into that type of arrangement simply because of the depository processes, the forms, I mean, there's a considerable investment to get those processes going. So you are correct in what
Thank
you
you.
said.
Any other questions? Mr. Arredondo.
I motion that we approve the district's RFP as presented and allow staff to post accordingly.
A second.
I have a question, Mr. Barton. I think when this was first proposed and it came as a trustee discussion point or agendized as trustees supporting, the administration was hesitant. It seemed like in large part out of maybe not knowing what would be involved and needing to do more research. Now that you know more and you've prepared this, do we have a recommendation from the administration with regard to this proposal?
I think in conversation with the superintendent and in trying to take counsel from experts in this area, the amount of money that was moved would be a big deciding factor. We have the benefit of having some resources right now, and investing a small percentage of that into local institutions, I don't think it's a negative thing, especially if the terms are equivalent to what we're doing. I think that's pretty good. But to move a large chunk into, I don't want something that's untested, as opposed to the systems that we've had in place with tech school for probably a generation of people in this district. I mean, if you were to say $10 million, $15 million, that should be fairly concerning. If it was something much smaller, a much smaller percentage than that, honestly, the local institution is going to struggle with anything seven figures. Anything over $1 million, we think someone's really going to struggle to take on simply because of the demands to collateralize it. But the RFP leaves that to them, and I think it's on page 10. They tell us how much money they're willing to take on and under what terms, and the board can consider the different proposals.
So this would come back to us once you receive the proposals, and we could at that point determine the scale?
You would determine the proposal that you accept.
Right.
And so we could even do this as an information presentation in March and just allow you to see what came back to us and in what terms. And then, whatever course of time the decision took from there, if it was an action item that night or later, that would be, I think, the prudent process.
Okay, Ms. Hanson, you had a question?
I'm gonna be voting against this just because I have concerns about moving monies out of tax pool, very trusted, accounts that we've, used for as long as they've been available, so.
Ms. Villalpando?
I would say that I'm against it too, mainly because this tax pool is being used by other school districts, municipalities and county governments, and to try to make us different than that's been going on for years. And for the concerns, Mr. Barton, that you mentioned too, I just couldn't vote for this. And and the expense that we're going to examine it. I mean, to find out about what it would take for us to transfer some money.
Okay. And Ms.
Yeah.
Halsey?
So I don't think that we would be putting any money at risk by doing this, honestly. And I also have a question in terms of, does our involvement in tax pool provide any community benefits? So do they provide any money back to the community in any form or any services back other than holding on to the money?
No, ma'am, but they do provide a superior return to what our local institutions we think can do. If we're going to give benefit to our teachers or something in that process, that may be a reason to not receive as much interest. But tax pool is the industry standard for school districts and municipalities.
But they don't provide like financial education courses inside our high school like A+ does. They're not helping to rebuild fields throughout the community, to provide camps for the days when there isn't school because we have professional learning, right?
You are correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Arredondo?
So as we call for a vote on this item, this was an initiative initiated by me for the sole intent that currently the San Marcos CISD's unrestricted fund balance, which is the money that we could essentially spend with a majority vote of this board, if we so choose, totals just south of $40 million. So for the past decade, the ISD, my colleagues and I, for the past 5 years have chosen not to spend that money in salaries and benefits, not chosen it to do bus replacements or anything like that. We have put this money in tax pool and we've seen some extremely healthy returns on investment. So much so that we have been almost compelled on numerous occasions to circumvent the will of the voters and build a ISD central administration with the money that we have earned with interest investing in tax pool. And quite frankly, I think when we talk about the things we wish we could do as board members up here to end generational poverty and positively affect our students, we dismiss things because it's different and because we haven't done it before or because we're told that this isn't our job. But quite frankly, I think this is our job. It's overseeing the financial resources of the district and it's overseeing taxpayer dollars. Yes, these are ISD funds in our ISD's fund balance, but these are tax dollars right now, and they do nothing for anyone in tax pool accounts. And so here, if we move even just a small percentage of our ISD's general fund, it gives local financial institutions the means to invest that money back into our community. And as one of those students that we talk about up here, coming from generational poverty, as a beneficiary of our district's free and reduced lunch price program, the biggest challenge that our students face every day is poverty. And this is how we combat that. This is what we do, leveraging ISD resources to try and end the cycle of poverty that afflicts so many in our community. And saying that it is better spent or better invested by putting $40 million worth of your tax dollars and everyone's tax dollars in a tax pool account, I think is misguided and short-sighted, any percentage. And again, when we talk about this time and time again, we have the opportunity here to do something I think this community hasn't seen before and leverage our resources for the betterment of the community, and I just don't understand how people cannot support that.
Ms. Hanson?
If I knew how they were going to actually benefit the district, or our students and the parents, then I might consider that. But we have a $40 million, yes, but we're down to $31 million when you talk about the over $8 million budget deficit that we passed. So we've already taken a chunk out of that fund balance.
Okay. Talked it out. The motion is to approve as presented, by Arredondo, second by Halsey. All in favor? 3. All opposed?
I'm abstaining.
Okay, well, carries 3-2.
You didn't vote?
Well, hold on.
You didn't vote.
I was hoping it would tie, and then I could offer an amendment, but I don't think we can carry with 3 with 7 present.
No.
Oh, boy.
I think we can. Yeah, we can.
We can? All right, well, then it did.
Are you abstaining?
I would question
No,
it.
I just didn't want to push it one way or the other because I wanted to cap the
The
amount, but
exemption is in
apparently
the
that
I mean,
did
I
not
think
work
we'll
out.
be able, this has to come back to us, again, this is just the RFP. I mean, we haven't approved any dollar amount, we haven't approved any financial institution, any agreement, it's just going out into the community and see what comes back,
See if
so.
anybody wants to-
I'll live with it, 3-2. Postia McLaughlin abstaining.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Item 8D, consider approval of it. This is a strange night. Consider approval of interlocal agreement between San Marcos CISD and City of San Marcos for shared use of Mendez Elementary Field.
Page 70 and 71 of your board book. This is an exciting partnership with the City of San Marcos. They reached out to us and they saw a way to benefit both our facilities and the San Marcos citizens. Apparently there's a game called pickleball that there's a great constituency for in our city. They saw that our tennis courts at Mendez would be readily accessible and a popular place for people to play. And so they asked if they could do some renovations there and if we would allow them to use those courts. The agreement is on page 71 for your review.
Why is it agendized by mentioning the Mendez Elementary Field?
The MOU originated with the city. Their legal team wrote it, then ours revised it. So that would be their terminology, and we didn't scratch it. I felt like that was readily recognizable.
Okay. I mean, facilities in section 4 defines it as tennis courts. The agenda part, I definitely wouldn't want pickleball courts on that field, but.
No, sir, they're going to do those tennis courts right there.
Yeah,
Ms.
that-
Hanson?
That was my concern, that it be just specifically tennis courts. And are those in use right now?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
They're in disrepair, to be honest.
That's what my understanding was, but I wanted to make sure.
Ms. Halsey?
It's just there.
Yeah, I move that we approve the interlocal agreement between the San Marcos CISD and the City of San Marcos for shared use of Mendez Elementary tennis courts.
I'll second.
And Mr. Barton, it looked like the city had, I guess, first right of refusal to use those. Will they be using, was it your understanding they would be using the facility while children were at school?
That's not the intention. In fact, expressly, we ask that they not. They may have 1 or 2 events a year where they have a large tournament and they bring people in to play. They would let us know in advance. We would make sure our campus makes the appropriate adjustments. But the intention is to not have those courts in use during the school day.
Could we not just say that? Could we not add that to the MOU, that they wouldn't use the facility during a school day, and that way then they would have to come to us to make an exception from the rule that's outlined in the MOU instead of vice versa? Because
I'll clarify
I don't
that.
want to hear,
That was
oh,
the
it'll only be once or
intention.
twice, and then it's like every week, and it seems disruptive if we'll have kids in the gym or potentially around there, and then we'll have these pickleball players, whoever they are.
I agree with Mr. McLaughlin. I think it needs to be specific. I mean, outlined that it's not gonna be used during school days.
Right, my concern there is traffic, parking. For our staff and parents and, trying to pick up. If they're there, they're gonna wanna park somewhere. I don't think Mendez has extra parking available
No, they don't.
during the school day. So that was my concern too. That it be changed to tennis courts and that they not, be there when school's going on.
Ms. Halsey?
Yeah, I think this is terrific. I don't actually foresee any problems. I've seen them play pickleball in the rec space in the park, and I think that this will be great, but I would also like to encourage staff to reach out to the city if there are other unused fields that are going on in ways that we can do more of this, because I think this is we know that our kids, when they're showing up for school and kindergarten, that they are not kindergarten ready, and one of the big problems is about physical abilities and gross motor skills and fine motor skill development, and I think that this is one great thing that we can do to help the community improve that.
Trustee McLaughlin, 5.1, does that satisfy your concern at the very last sentence?
Oh, yeah, that does. At least that concern, that voiced concern, maybe not the others, but yeah, the parties agree the facility will not be available during school hours. I didn't see that when I reviewed it. Thank you. Anything else? All right, we got a motion and a second to approve pickleball at Mendez. All in favor? 5, 6. I'm opposed.
No pickleball for you?
No pickleball.
Tennis is so much better. And I was undefeated on those courts in junior high, and it's just a sad day that a sport for affluent Anglo old people is now taking over my
Hey, man.
vaunted tennis court. I mean, have you ever seen kids in poverty, 4-year-old? We don't need to go into this.
Maybe we can have them start learning.
All right,
And you
super.
said 5, 6,
Maybe you'll be,
6, 1?
maybe in the future you'll
6-1.
become
Okay.
the famous pickleball.
All right, it doesn't matter. It carried. It's just sour grapes. 8E, consideration and possible action to accept the Transportation Annex Bond Project.
This is a new system for San Marcos CISD. It is in board policy that the board is to accept any project before it's complete and before the final payment is issued. This project was the first one that began years ago, and it was complete October of 2019. So we are behind that expectation, and this will be the only one where we don't meet that timeline.
I move that we approve accepting the Transportation Annex Bond Project.
I'll second the motion.
Motion by Hanson, second by Villapando. Any discussion? All in favor? 7. All right, back in this posture. 8F, consider resolution to participate in joint election to be held May 2, 2020.
It's broken out by county, which is something new to us this year. Each county takes a slightly different approach. Hayes County has a joint election agreement and a resolution for the board to consider, and then the contract. And then Caldwell and Guadalupe counties just provided a contract for election services.
Do you anticipate that we'll be able to cancel the Caldwell County election?
Yes, sir. We're going to do that at the next board meeting.
Okay, so we're
If
going to
the board
call it.
approves. Yes.
Okay. A motion?
Don't make the motion.
A motion to participate in the joint election? Okay, motion by Cantu,
I'll second.
second by Hanson. Discussion? All in favor? 7-0. We have 3 contracts. I don't, if y'all want to do them individually, you can.
Approve
I don't know if
The other
anyone's-
ones,
Have to do that.
we can just,
Are there any abstentions from any of them? No?
No.
All right, well then just motion them as a group.
Wait a minute.
but wait a minute, on
Why
the.
are we going to do Caldwell?
Caldwell,
I was
let's-
told we were gonna call it, we were
Next
going to
month.
issue it and then bring it back. That's what I just
Approve
asked.
yeah,
Yeah,
we,
but we
next
can
month
table
we're going
that.
to bring each one of these
Why
back.
can't we just table her?
That needs to be tabled, we can't vote on it.
I mean, it's silly to,
Can I move to tabling the Caldwell County election?
Were we
Yes, you
given
can.
instruction by legal that we were supposed to, I don't wanna be out of some sort of compliance.
And usually it's been a package deal, right? Where it's just one.
Before.
Yes. So
But
this
this time
new.
around, we, you know,
Mr.
Whatever
Redondo.
y'all say.
I'm going to make a motion that we approve items G, H, and I as presented by staff.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay,
That means we're not voting
we have a motion and a second to approve all 3 contracts, G, H, and I as provided. Any further discussion?
I'd like to table H.
There's a motion and a second on the floor, Trustee
All right,
Hanson.
we'll vote this, and if it goes down, we'll do that. All in favor? 4 opposed? 2-3. 4-3. Carries. That gets us through items for action.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Cantu.
Second.
Second by Redondo. All in favor? That's 7. That's it.
7.